They always said blood was thicker than water. But what they never told me was how suffocating blood could become, how it could drown you, betray you, and bind you to a fate you never chose. My name doesn't matter, not yet. What matters is that my story begins with a family that looked perfect to the world, shiny, respectable, enviable. The kind of family people pointed at and whispered, they have everything. But behind the smiles, behind the photographs framed in gold, there was rot. Invisible at first, but growing. I remember the nights most clearly. The silence in the mansion wasn't peace, it was tension. The kind of silence where even a ticking clock feels loud, where every shadow on the wall looks like it's watching you. We were 5 under one roof, my father, my mother, my older brother, my younger sister, and me. On the outside, we were a portrait of Grace. My father, a businessman everyone respected. My mother, the polished matriarch, adored in every circle. My brother, successful, charming, destined to inherit everything. My sister, the delicate beauty, spoiled and admired, and me, the quiet one. The one who listened, who observed, who never spoke too loudly, never demanded too much. They thought I was harmless, forgettable. That was their first mistake. You see, when you spend your life being overlooked, you learn to see what others don't. You learn to hear the whispers in locked rooms, to notice the papers left too close to the edge of a desk, to read the hidden meaning in every smile. I wasn't always bitter. No, in the beginning, I loved them. Or at least I tried to. I wanted their approval, their warmth, their recognition. But love in our house was a currency, and I was always bankrupt. I'll never forget the night it all began, the first crack in the mask of our family. It was during one of Father's parties. The mansion was alive with music and laughter. Champagne glasses clinked. The women wore diamonds. The men boasted of their fortunes. I was in the corner, as usual, invisible in a silk dress, chosen not by me, but for me, because appearances mattered more than comfort. I stood by the balcony doors, watching the rain streak the glass, when I overheard it. My brother's voice, low, sharp, calculated. "She's a liability," he said. And then Father's response, colder than I had ever heard. "Don't worry. She won't stand in the way. She never has." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I don't even think my heart beat in that moment. They were talking about me. A liability. The words sliced through me. I wanted to confront them, demand answers, but I stayed still, silent, because sometimes silence tells you more than questions ever could. That was the night I realized the truth. I was not part of their plans. I was not family. I was an obstacle. From then on, I started watching more carefully. My mother's sudden coldness when she looked at me. My sister's sly smirks when Father praised her. The documents my brother guarded so closely. Pieces of a puzzle I didn't yet understand. But I would, because betrayal doesn't happen all at once. It drips slow, steady, poisoning everything until you can't ignore the taste anymore, and the poison was spreading. Do you know what it feels like to sit at a dinner table surrounded by people who share your blood, yet feel like a stranger? In your own home, the long oak table, polished to a shine, meals prepared by chefs who worked tirelessly. But no warmth. Just silence broken by clinking cutlery, polite remarks, and the unspoken hierarchy carved into every glance. Father at the head, my brother at his right hand. My mother, perfectly poised. My sister, smiling sweetly. And me, sitting at the edge, like a guest no one invited. It wasn't what they said, it was what they didn't. No questions about my day. No acknowledgement of my achievements, small as they were. My voice might as well have been invisible, replaceable, forgettable. That's what they wanted me to believe. That was their second mistake, because being invisible is powerful. It means no one notices where you move, what you see, what you hear. And I was listening, always listening. The weeks that followed blurred together. Parties, business meetings, whispers behind closed doors. And then one moment that changed everything. I found it by accident. A letter, hidden beneath father's papers in his study. It wasn't addressed to me, of course, but I read it anyway. And when I did, my hands shook, my breath caught, and my world tilted. It was about me, my inheritance, my share of the family business, my future. But in that letter, in cold, precise words, my future was gone. They were cutting me out, legally, permanently, as if I had never belonged at all. I sat there, clutching the paper, feeling something inside me snap. It wasn't sadness. Not anymore. It wasn't even anger. It was something darker, something sharper, revenge. And in that moment, as I folded the letter back into place, one thought consumed me. They had underestimated me for the last time. That night, I stopped being the quiet one, the harmless one, the invisible one. I became the watcher, the collector of secrets, the shadow in the halls. And I promised myself if they wanted war, I would give them one, but on my terms, not with screams or threats. No, my revenge would be quieter, sharper, unforgettable, because in this family, betrayal runs deep. But so does vengeance, and this is where it begins. The days that followed were a study in masks. Theirs, flawless, as always. Mine, newly forged. I smiled at breakfast. I nodded at their plans. I laughed when laughter was expected. All the while, my mind replayed the words of that letter, over and over, until the sentences etched themselves into my bones. I had been erased on paper long before I even realized I was being erased in life, but I didn't let them see my cracks. That would please them too much. Instead, I gave them what they wanted: a daughter who knew her place, a sister who wouldn't challenge, a shadow that blended with the walls. Yet every glance became sharper to me, every silence heavier. Every whispered conversation that died when I entered the room told me more than if they had spoken aloud. At breakfast one morning, father announced another expansion of the business. My brother beamed with pride as if it were his achievement. My mother praised him, my sister clapped politely, and I simply sipped my tea. I saw my brother's eyes flick toward me, measuring, dismissing, assured of my insignificance. I kept my eyes on the porcelain cup, but inside, a seed of fury grew. Roots. He believed he had won already. He believed my silence was surrender. He had no idea that silence was my weapon. I began studying them as if they were strangers. My brother, always so careful in public, revealed his arrogance in private, boasting too loudly to friends, entertaining mistresses under the guise of late meetings. My sister, the pampered jewel, spent money recklessly, weaving a web of debts father knew nothing about. And my mother, oh, my mother, perfect to the world, but brittle when the doors closed. Her eyes lingered too long on father's business partner. Her voice trembled too easily in hushed phone calls. They all had cracks. I only needed to widen them. But before revenge could be born, I had to endure the daily humiliation of existing in a house that treated me like a ghost. At dinner, they spoke over me as though I were furniture. Decisions were made about family affairs without so much as a glance in my direction. When guests visited, introductions passed me by. "This is my son," father would beam. "This is my daughter," he would add, gesturing to my sister. But when it came to me, his hand barely lifted, his voice barely warmed. "And this is our other one, the other one." The phrase stuck worse than any insult. To be reduced to a shadow, a placeholder, an afterthought. But I smiled through it, biting down the words that threatened to spill. "Not yet," I told myself. "Not now," because revenge, like any fine meal, must be prepared slowly. The more invisible they made me, the more I learned. I discovered my brother had opened an offshore account, quietly siphoning funds from the company. He thought his clever tricks were hidden, but papers left half-covered on his desk told me otherwise. I discovered my sister had been blackmailing one of father's associates for jewels and feathers, her beauty her weapon, her recklessness her downfall. I discovered my mother had a secret drawer tucked behind her vanity, filled with letters, not addressed to father but written in another man's hand. Piece by piece, I collected them. My arsenal. But even as I built my case, even as I promised myself I would rise from the ashes they buried me in, there were nights when loneliness pressed too heavily against my ribs. I lay awake in my room, staring at the ceiling, remembering childhood moments when I thought love was real. Father lifting me on his shoulders when I was small. Mother brushing my hair with gentleness before she hardened into stone. My brother once protecting me from bullies at school. My sister holding my hand when nightmares woke me. Were those memories lies? Or had time twisted them into illusions? I didn't know anymore. All I knew was the present truth. I was alone, and yet that solitude became my strength. No one stood beside me. No one defended me. No one would fight for me. So I learned to fight for myself. The shift inside me was subtle at first. I started dressing differently, not to please them, but to unsettle them. Colors bolder, fabrics sharper. At family gatherings, I carried myself not like a shadow but like a storm cloud, silent yet heavy with unspoken thunder. Their eyes flickered with confusion, though their words remained dismissive. I practiced patience. I let them believe I was still harmless. I let them believe my silence was compliance. But within me, the tide was turning. One afternoon, I caught my brother off guard. He was on the phone, speaking too quickly, too nervously. I stepped into the room, and he snapped his laptop shut like a guilty child. He forced a smile, but I saw the sweat on his brow. For a moment, his confidence cracked. And in that crack, I saw fear. It thrilled me, because fear was the beginning of power shifting. That evening, as I passed my sister's room, I heard her voice rise in panic. She was on the phone too, begging, threatening, her tone desperate. I paused outside the door, my heart pounding, listening. She owed more than she could repay. She was drowning in her own vanity. Another crack, another weapon, and my mother, polished, perfect, untouchable, revealed her flaw too. I walked into her study one night to return a book, only to find her staring at one of those hidden letters, tears smudging the ink. She startled when she saw me, snapping the drawer shut, her mask sliding back into place. But I had seen enough. My mother, the queen of composure, was vulnerable after all. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was blind. But I was watching. Always watching. It became almost intoxicating, this secret knowledge. While they ignored me, I held their lives in my hands, piece by fragile piece. I said nothing. I did nothing. Not yet. But the power shifted quietly. Invisibly, I wasn't the liability. They were, and soon, I would prove it. The turning point came at another party, weeks later. Guests flooded the mansion again, glasses sparkled. Laughter filled the halls. My brother boasted loudly about a deal he claimed to have closed. Father beamed with pride. Mother glided from guest to guest in her flawless gown, and my sister soaked up admiration like sunlight. And me, I slipped unnoticed into the study, the place where secrets lived. On Father's desk lay documents, contracts, bank statements, letters. My hands moved quickly, eyes scanning, heart racing. And then I found it, another paper, signed, sealed, confirming what I had already known, but never fully believed. I was gone. Stripped of everything. My name erased from the will, my inheritance redirected, my existence dismissed as though I had never mattered at all. I folded the paper carefully, sliding it back into place, and walked out of the room with a calmness that surprised even me, because that night, as music swelled and laughter echoed, I knew the truth more clearly than ever. I had nothing left to lose, and when a person has nothing left to lose, they become unstoppable. That was the night I chose the path fully. The night I vowed to dismantle the illusion of our perfect family. The night I stopped hoping for their love and started plotting for their downfall. One by one, I would expose them. One by one, I would let the cracks turn into fractures, and the fractures into ruins. They wanted me invisible. They would regret ever failing to see me, because I was no longer their shadow. I was their reckoning. The strange thing about betrayal is that once you notice it, you start seeing it everywhere. Every smile looks sharper. Every kind word tastes poisoned. Nothing is what it seems. I began to notice the subtle exchanges, the way my brother leaned closer to Father when business was mentioned, his voice lowering into conspiratorial tones. I noticed the way my mother's gaze skipped past me as if my existence embarrassed her. I noticed how my sister's laughter always seemed louder when it was at my expense, as though mocking me was her only way to prove she mattered. But what they didn't notice was how closely I was watching them. One evening, Father gathered us in the dining hall for what he called a family announcement. The chandelier glowed above us, the table set with polished silverware and crystal glasses. It looked like a celebration, but I felt the chill before he even opened his mouth. He raised his glass. "To the future of our family," he said, pride dripping from his voice. "To your brother, who will soon take on greater responsibilities. To your sister, whose grace brings honor to our name. And to your mother, whose guidance has held us together." He paused, his eyes gliding past me as if I were a ghost. "And to you," he added at last, his tone flat, his glass lowering before it could even reach his lips. "May you continue to find peace." The table erupted in applause for everyone else. My hands remained in my lap. My heart thudded painfully, but my face betrayed nothing. Peace. The word rang louder than the clinking of glasses. It wasn't a blessing, it was dismissal. He might as well have said, "Stay quiet. Stay away. Don't interfere." That was the first public humiliation, subtle but sharp. And it was only the beginning. A week later, I attended another event, an evening gala filled with Father's associates, business partners, politicians. It was the kind of night where appearances mattered more than air itself. My brother stood beside Father, radiating pride. My sister floated like a jewel on display. And my mother commanded the room with effortless grace, and me, I stood at the edge of the crowd, clutching a glass I never sipped from, waiting for the moment I would inevitably be overlooked. But this time, it wasn't just silence that cut me. It was words. "Is this your daughter?" one of father's associates asked, glancing my way. Father's smile tightened. He placed a hand on my sister's shoulder. "This is my daughter," he said proudly. The man's eyes shifted toward me. "And her?" Father's hesitation lasted only a breath, but it was enough to pierce me. His smile dimmed, his tone softened into something dismissive. "She's not involved in family matters." A quieter one, you might say. The man nodded politely, but the damage was done. The humiliation burned hot across my skin, hotter than the lights above us. To be reduced to nothing in front of strangers, to be erased so casually, it was a cruelty sharper than any blade. I excused myself quietly, retreating to the balcony, where cold air stung my lungs. I stared at the city lights, blurred through unshed tears, and felt the weight of my insignificance pressing down on me. But instead of breaking me, it forged me. I whispered to myself, "Remember this. Remember how it feels, because pain, when remembered, becomes fuel." And I would need every drop of it for what was to come. The humiliations grew bolder after that. At family dinners, father spoke only to my siblings, never to me. At gatherings, mother introduced us as though I was simply another distant cousin, never her child. My sister giggled to her friends about how I was too plain, too dull, too irrelevant. And my brother, he didn't bother to hide his contempt anymore. He called me useless once, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. They thought these moments weakened me. They thought each humiliation pushed me deeper into the shadows. But in truth, every insult was another stone in the foundation I was building. Every slight, every dismissal, every cruel word carved my resolve sharper, harder, because when the time came, I wouldn't just take back what they stole from me. I would take everything they cherished and leave them to choke on their own pride. The turning point came one night when father hosted yet another dinner. The room was filled with guests, laughter, glasses clinking. I wore a dress darker than usual, sharp lines that contrasted against my sister's pastel gown. She sparkled like a doll, while I carried myself like a shadow. During the meal, father announced my brother's new role in the company. Applause filled the room. I clapped, too, my hands steady, my face unreadable. Then one of the guests, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, turned toward me. "And what about you?" she asked. "What is your place in this grand empire?" The room fell quiet for a moment. My heart thudded. Father chuckled. "Her place?" He shook his head, his voice carrying just enough amusement to sting. "She prefers to stay out of such things. She isn't cut out for business." The laughter that followed was light, polite, but it felt like a dagger in my chest. I smiled. A small, cold smile. And I said nothing, but inside, I whispered, "You'll regret this." That night, I went to my room and laid out the pieces I had gathered: my brother's offshore accounts, my sister's debts, my mother's secret letters. I studied them like a map, tracing the lines that would one day lead to their downfall. I realized then that revenge wasn't just about striking back. It was about patience. It was about letting them believe they had destroyed me, only to watch them crumble when I revealed the truth, because the sweetest revenge isn't loud. It's quiet. It's precise. It's delivered with the same dismissive smile they once gave me. And when the time came, they would finally see me, not as the invisible one, not as the liability, but as the storm they never expected. Humiliation has a way of staining everything it touches. You can wash your face, smooth your dress, paste on a smile, but the sting lingers beneath the skin, A quiet reminder that you've been made small in front of others. By the time the next storm arrived, I had already grown used to being diminished. But nothing could have prepared me for the spectacle they were about to make of me. It began with a celebration. My brother had secured another contract for the company, or so father claimed. A grand party was arranged, invitations sent to the city's most important names. The mansion gleamed brighter than ever, every chandelier polished, every table set with the finest silver. My sister paraded in a gown meant to dazzle, my mother oversaw every detail, and father, of course, basked in his own reflected glory. I dressed simply. A black gown, modest compared to the glitter around me. I didn't want to compete with their display. I wanted to watch. The guests arrived. Laughter filled the halls. Music swelled from the orchestra. I lingered at the edges as always, invisible, yet present, listening, observing. And then father took the stage. Friends, he announced, raising a glass. Tonight, we celebrate not just business success, but family success. My son, my pride, has proven once again his worth, his strength, his ability to lead us into the future. Applause erupted. My brother bowed slightly, his smile smug. And my daughter, father continued, gesturing toward my sister, graces us all with her charm, her beauty, her elegance. She is the jewel of this family. More applause, more smiles. Then his gaze flicked briefly toward me. A glance so brief it could have been an accident. His voice softened, not with affection, but with dismissal. And as for our other daughter, he chuckled lightly, as if the words were a joke. Well, she prefers to remain in the shadows. Perhaps that is her gift, quietness. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Soft, polite, but cruel all the same. I stood frozen, my glass trembling. In my hand, the weight of 100 eyes pressing down on me. Quietness, that was what he gave me. That was what he reduced me to. A punchline at my own expense. I forced a smile, forced myself to bow my head slightly as if in agreement, forced myself to swallow the rage clawing at my throat. Because to lash out then would have given them victory. No, my silence, as always, was my shield. But inside, I screamed. That night, when the guests finally left and the mansion returned to silence, I locked myself in my room and let the fury consume me. I tore the pins from my hair, ripped the fabric of my gown, pressed my fist against the mirror until my knuckles turned white. I had thought I was prepared for humiliation. I had thought I could endure it, collect it, turn it into fuel. But that night broke something deeper. Because humiliation in private is a wound, but humiliation in public is a scar. And scars never fade. I whispered to myself again and again, through gritted teeth, through tears I refused to let fall. Remember this, remember this, remember this, because one day I would give them back their laughter. One day they would know what it felt like to be stripped bare in front of the world. One day their names would be spoken not with admiration, but with disgust. That night marked the end of my silence. The very next morning, I began moving differently. I rose earlier than usual, walked the halls when no one expected me, lingered near doors half open, listened more carefully to servants' whispers. I began speaking to people father thought beneath him, drivers, maids, assistants, people invisible like me. And invisibility, I realized, made us dangerous. Because those at the bottom saw everything the powerful tried to hide. It was a maid who told me first about my brother's mistress, a woman young, ambitious, and clever, the kind who knew how to dig her claws into wealthy men. My brother thought he was in control, but the maid had overheard enough to know the mistress had leveraged. It was the driver who hinted at my sister's late-night escapades, the clubs she snuck into, the debts she left behind, the names of men she borrowed from. My sister, the jewel of the family, was slowly shattering, and it was father's secretary, timid, nervous, but loyal to truth rather than loyalty, who gave me the first real proof of betrayal. She slipped a document into my hands one afternoon, eyes darting nervously to the door. It was a contract. My name erased. My brother's name, taking my place. I shouldn't be showing you this, she whispered. But you deserve to know. My hands trembled as I held the paper, but my voice was steady. Thank you, I said. And for the first time in months, I meant it. With every secret I collected, I felt myself grow stronger. No longer was I the forgotten daughter, the quiet shadow. I was becoming something else, something they would one day fear. But even as I built my arsenal, they continued their charade. My brother strutted with pride, my sister bathed in admiration, my mother glided through rooms as if nothing in the world could touch her, and father looked at me less and less, as though erasing me from his eyes would erase me from existence. I let them. I even encouraged it, smiling faintly, keeping my words short, lowering my gaze just enough to keep their confidence in my insignificance. Because revenge is sweetest when it comes to those who never see it approaching. The public humiliation they forced upon me would not be forgotten. I would give it back to them tenfold. I would let the world watch as their masks cracked, their secrets spilled, their reputations turned to ash. They laughed at me once. They would not laugh again, and so, in silence, I began to weave the first threads of their undoing. Isolation is louder than silence. It echoes. It presses against your ribs until breathing feels heavy. It eats away at your sense of self until you begin to question if you exist at all. After the night of my humiliation, I felt the walls of the mansion close in tighter. Every hallway stretched longer, every room colder. The very air seemed to thicken, filled with whispers I could no longer ignore. I tried, for a time, to carry on as I always had, to drift quietly from one corner of the house to another, to let the days pass without protest. But something inside me had cracked, and no amount of pretending could piece it back together. The servants avoided my gaze more than usual, as though my very presence embarrassed them. My sister flaunted new gowns and jewelry, each display a reminder that father's love brought her luxuries my existence never could. My brother walked taller, every stride carrying the arrogance of someone who believed the future was already his. And mother became colder still, her eyes like glass, her smile sharp enough to wound. I was still there, still breathing, still moving. But I had never felt so invisible. At tea meals, I barely ate. At night, I barely slept. I wandered the halls in the hours before dawn, listening to the house creak around me, the shadows shifting like ghosts. Sometimes I wondered if I was becoming one of them myself, present, but unseen. One evening, I overheard my name again. I had paused outside the sitting room, the door left slightly ajar. Inside, father spoke in a low voice to my brother. She is fragile, he said. We mustn't let her interfere. Best to keep her out of sight. She won't interfere, my brother replied confidently. She never has. They laughed softly together. Something inside me twisted. Fragile. That was what I was to them. A delicate thing, incapable of standing, incapable of fighting, incapable of mattering. I returned to my room that night and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The face staring back at me looked hollow, eyes ringed with shadows, lips pressed into a thin line. I hardly recognized myself. Fragile. I whispered the word aloud, testing its weight. And then I whispered it again, letting it cut deeper. Fragile. But even as I said it, another voice rose inside me, quiet at first, then stronger. Steady. No. Not fragile. Waiting. I wasn't broken. I wasn't weak. I was waiting for the right moment, the right opening, the right strike. And in the stillness of that night, I realized that my isolation was not a curse. It was a shield. While they basked in attention, I learned to move unseen. While they wasted themselves on praise, I sharpened myself on silence. While they laughed at me, I studied them. They thought they had banished me to the shadows. They didn't know shadows could swallow the light. In the days that followed, I began to change. Quietly, carefully, I rose earlier than the servants, walking the grounds before the sun. I read the books my family ignored, histories of power, memoirs of those who built empires and tore them down. I trained my mind the way others trained their bodies, feeding it with patience, with strategy, with resolve. The loneliness still weighed heavily, yes. There were nights when I lay awake, staring into the dark, aching for even the smallest gesture of love, a hand reaching out, a word of comfort, anything. But I had learned enough to know it would never come. So instead, I held myself. I whispered promises into the silence. You will not be invisible forever. You will not be fragile forever. One day, they will see you. One day, they will regret every scar they left upon you. My transformation was invisible to them, of course. They still dismissed me, still mocked me, still paraded themselves as the perfect family while erasing me from every picture, every conversation, every future. But beneath the surface, I was no longer the same. I began collecting more than secrets. I began collecting allies, quiet ones, invisible ones, people like me, overlooked and underestimated. The maid who told me of my brother's mistress, I asked her questions no one else bothered to ask. About her life, her struggles, her fears. For the first time, someone saw her, and in return, she saw me. She began to tell me more. The driver, who hinted at my sister's debts, I listened to his stories on long rides, stories he had never shared with anyone in the family. And in return, he told me the names of the men my sister owed, the places she went, the lies she spun. Even father's secretary, timid and fearful, began to trust me. She started leaving small pieces of truth where I could find them. A paper left slightly askew, a file left unlocked, a whisper in passing. They were not powerful people. They were not people anyone else in my family would consider useful. But to me, they were everything. Because power often hides in the overlooked. And I knew what it meant to be overlooked better than anyone. Still, the isolation lingered. The humiliation festered. I was changing, but change is slow, and pain is fast. There was one night, deep in that lonely season, when the weight nearly crushed me. I had wandered into the empty dining hall, the long table stretching before me like a monument to everything I had lost. I sat in father's chair, just to feel for a moment what it was like to be at the head, and I imagined them all, their mother, brother, sister, laughing, eating, dismissing me as they always did. I imagined standing, raising a glass, silencing them with one word, one truth, one strike of revenge so sharp it would carve the laughter from their throats. The fantasy was so vivid, so intoxicating that I laughed aloud. A bitter, hollow laugh that echoed through the empty hall. That was the night I knew for certain I could not go back. The person I had been was gone. The fragile daughter, the invisible sister, the quiet shadow. She was dead. In her place was someone else. Someone they had created with their cruelty, their dismissal, their betrayal, and she would be their downfall. The moment I accepted that the old version of me had died, I began to breathe differently. Each inhale carried steel instead of dust. Each exhale carried intent instead of despair. For so long, I had clung to the hope of being loved. I had waited at the edge of the table, starved for crumbs of kindness. But the truth was now carved into me as deeply as a scar. They would never love me, and even if they did, it would never erase the years of silence, the wounds of rejection, the nights of humiliation. No. Love was no longer my goal. Power was. It began with small things, testing the edges of their world. I started listening more sharply when my sister spoke to her friends on the phone, noting every inflection, every nervous laugh when money came up. I lingered in the library when father's business partners visited, memorizing their faces, their words, the way they shifted uneasily when the talk turned to debts. I walked the gardens where mother entertained her circle of admirers, watching the way she smiled too tightly, the way her hands fidgeted with her pearls when their questions pressed too close. They had cracks, all of them. I had only been too blind to see them before. But now, my eyes saw everything. The first opportunity revealed itself one rainy afternoon. I had been walking past father's study when I heard him arguing with his secretary. His voice thundered, low but sharp, words like knives cutting through the heavy air. I told you to bury that account. If this leaks, I'm sorry, sir. I'll handle it. You'd better. Or we've finished. Finished. The word rattled in my head. Finished. Father's empire, the wealth and reputation he had built, was not as invincible as he pretended. He was hiding something dangerous enough to make him raise his voice, something fragile enough to threaten collapse. I knew better than to push too hard, too fast. But I also knew that secrets have a way of unraveling on their own, if one only knows where to pull. That night, I lingered near the secretary's desk after everyone had gone. And there it was, a folder left half open, as if deliberately forgotten. Inside were numbers that didn't add up, accounts linked to names I didn't recognize, transactions that looked like shadows dancing on paper. I didn't understand all of it yet, but I didn't need to. Not yet. What mattered was that father was not untouchable, and if father wasn't untouchable, none of them were. The realization filled me with a quiet, burning thrill. For the first time in my life, I wasn't powerless. I held something, even if it was only the edge of the thread. All I had to do was keep pulling. Meanwhile, my sister's fard began to tremble. She had always carried herself like royalty, her beauty polished and flawless. But beauty fades quickly when debt gnaws at its edges. I noticed her slipping out late at night, her perfume lingering in the halls long after she was gone. The driver, loyal now to me, told me the names of the men she met, the desperation in her voice as she bargained with them. One night, when she returned, I watched her from the shadows of the staircase. She stumbled slightly as she entered, her face pale beneath her makeup, her smile brittle. She didn't see me. She never did, and I realized something. She was terrified. My perfect, untouchable sister, the one who had always stolen the spotlight, who had laughed the loudest at my pain was drowning. It was almost intoxicating, seeing her mask slip. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to whisper in her ear, "I see you now. I see the cracks." But I didn't. Not yet. Patience was a weapon sharper than any blade. And then there was Mother. Beautiful, cold, flawless Mother. For her, it wasn't that or secrecy that betrayed her. It was pride. One afternoon, she hosted her circle of women in the garden. I stood at the window, hidden, listening to their laughter float through the open air. At first, it was the usual chatter, gowns, travel art. But then one of the women, her voice sugar-sweet, asked about a charity Mother had boasted of supporting. "Oh, of course, it's thriving," Mother replied. Her smile tight, but her hands twisted in her lap. The woman pressed further, curious about the funds, about the impact. Mother laughed it off, but her voice cracked. And in that crack, I heard it. She had lied. She had invented her generosity, painted herself as benevolent when in truth, the charity was nothing but smoke, pride, the deadliest sin. It would be her undoing. By then, the picture was becoming clearer. My family, so perfect in the eyes of the world, was nothing but a house of cards. One touch, one gust of wind, and it would all come crashing down, and I would be the storm. But storms do not rush. They gather, they build, they darken the sky until the air itself hums with electricity. And then, when the moment is right, they strike. As I began to gather. I gathered secrets. I gathered allies. I gathered strength. The maid slipped me letters my sister thought she had hidden. The driver whispered the names of father's rivals, men eager to see him fall. The secretary left me more documents, each one more damning than the last. Piece by piece, the puzzle formed. Piece by piece, I built the foundation of something new, something dangerous. There were nights when doubt still crept in. Nights when I lay awake, the weight of years pressing on me, the echo of their voices calling me fragile, useless, invisible. But each time, I reminded myself, I am not who I was. I am not waiting for them to see me. I am preparing for them to kneel before me. The first move would come soon. I could feel it in my bones like thunder rumbling in the distance. And when it came, it would not be gentle. It would be the beginning of the end. The first move was never meant to be loud. Loudness attracts suspicion. No, the first strike had to be subtle, almost invisible. Something so small that they wouldn't even realize the storm had begun until they were already caught in it. I chose my sister as the starting point. Not because she had hurt me the most, but because her cracks were the widest. Desperation makes people sloppy. Desperation makes people vulnerable. One night, after she left in a flurry of perfume and silk, I entered her room. It wasn't difficult. The lock was laughable, her sense of invincibility even more so. I moved through her space quietly, the way a shadow moves through an unlit hall. Her vanity told me everything. Letters tucked beneath makeup palettes, receipts crumpled in the bottom of drawers, photographs of men she thought she had hidden away. The evidence of her secret life was everywhere, tangled up with powders and pearls. I didn't take everything. That would have been reckless. Instead, I took just enough: one letter, one receipt, one photograph, a sampling. The next day, those items appeared in a place where she couldn't ignore them, inside her own handbag. When she found them, I watched from the doorway as her face drained of color. She pulled the letter out first, her hands trembling, her eyes darting around the room as though someone might be watching. She stuffed it back in, then pulled it out again, as if trying to convince herself it was still there. The panic in her eyes was delicious. She believed she had lost control of her secrets, that someone close had seen too much. But she didn't know who. That was the point, and the beauty of it was that I didn't have to accuse her of anything. She would accuse herself. Her paranoia would do my work for me. Sure enough, over the next few days, I noticed her becoming restless. She snapped at the servants, avoided eye contact with Mother, and grew increasingly sharp with Father when he asked about her social outings. The more she unraveled, the more visible her weakness became. And weakness, in this house, was blood in the water. But while my sister drowned in paranoia, I turned my attention to Father. His empire was built on illusions, numbers painted to look like more than they were, partnerships that existed only on paper. I had the beginnings of evidence from the secretary's files, but it wasn't enough to destroy him. Not yet, S.O. I started whispering, not to him, of course. To others. The driver carried messages I never signed. Anonymous notes slipped into the hands of his rivals at meetings. Hints of irregularities, suggestions of missing funds, questions they hadn't thought to ask until my words planted the seed. It didn't take long before Father noticed. He stormed into dinner one evening, his face flushed with fury. "Who has been speaking?" he demanded, slamming his glass on the table. "Which one of you has been running your mouth?" Mother stared at him coolly, unbothered. My sister shrank into herself, already too wrapped up in her own fears to protest. And I lowered my gaze. The picture of innocence, the silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. Finally, Father growled and left the table, muttering curses under his breath. I allowed myself a small smile that no one saw. The seed had taken root, but perhaps the most satisfying piece came with Mother. Perfect, untouchable Mother, whose pride was as brittle as glass. Her charity lie was the easiest to manipulate. All it took was a single phone call, made from a public booth, voice disguised just enough. A concerned supporter asking questions. To a local reporter, wondering why there were no public records of the donations Mother had so proudly spoken about. The story was small at first. A tiny column in the society pages, just a whisper of doubt. But whispers spread quickly when pride is involved. By the time Mother saw it, she was livid. She tore the paper apart in front of her friends, insisting it was slander, lies, jealousy. But I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. She knew someone had pierced the veil, and I was the invisible hand that had guided the blade. One strike at my sister, one strike at Father, one strike at Mother, all small, all deniable, all seeds, but seeds grow. What none of them realized was that I didn't need to destroy them in one blow. That would have been too easy, too merciful. No, I wanted them to feel the slow unraveling, the creeping dread of knowing that their perfect world was cracking around them, piece by piece. And I wanted them to wonder who was pulling their strings. It was almost funny, really. For years, I had been the invisible one, the forgotten one, the quiet shadow at the edge of their lives. Now, invisibility was my weapon. The more they overlooked me, the more powerful I became, and soon invisibility would turn into something else entirely, dominance. The first strike had been made, and though none of them knew it yet, the game had begun, and I always played to win. Paranoia is a beautiful thing. It doesn't need proof. It doesn't need logic. It doesn't even need truth. All it needs is a whisper, a shadow, a seed of doubt, and it will grow wild, choking out everything else. By the time the second week arrived, My family was already suffocating on it. My sister went first. She couldn't stop glancing over her shoulder, clutching her handbag as if someone might snatch it away and reveal her secrets. She became sharp-tongued, impatient, snapping at mother's endless chatter, retreating early from dinners with the excuse of a headache. But I knew better. Her headaches weren't real, they were the pounding echoes of fear. One evening, I watched as she stood at her vanity, pulling out drawer after drawer, rifling through her things with frantic hands. She whispered to herself, over and over, "Where is it? Where did I put it?" The irony, of course, was that I had already placed it all back, just in different places. The photograph she thought she lost reappeared behind her jewelry box. The receipt turned up tucked between the pages of her diary. Her own belongings betrayed her, and she couldn't explain how. But paranoia doesn't live alone. It spreads, it infects. Soon, father began to notice her strange behavior. "What's wrong with you?" he barked one night when she refused to accompany him to a gala. "Are you hiding something?" Her denial was swift, desperate. "No, father, of course not." But denial, spoken too quickly, is often mistaken for guilt. From that night forward, father's gaze lingered on her longer, sharper. Suspicion hardened in his eyes, not just at her, but at everyone. He became restless at the table, snapping at the servants, muttering under his breath when documents weren't where he swore he'd left them. His temper flared more often. His drinking grew heavier. The man who once ruled with cold precision now ruled with chaos, and mother, was not immune. The society gossip had begun to hum around her like mosquitoes in the summer. The whispers about her charities, the questions about her records. She tried to swat them away with her usual grace, her perfect composure, but even the strongest fard cracks when pressure builds from within. One morning, I found her sitting in her private lounge, the newspaper crumpled in her hands, her lips trembling as she read. She didn't see me. She didn't notice the shadow I cast across the marble floor. She was too busy rereading the tiny column about unverified philanthropic claims, her knuckles white as she gripped the page. She tore it in two shreds, yes. But the damage was done, and here was the true masterpiece of it all. None of them suspected me, not once. They suspected each other. At tea dinner, father's glare at my sister grew colder, harsher. My sister avoided his eyes, instead watching mother with an accusing stare of her own, as though believing that perhaps mother was the one who had tampered with her belongings. Mother, meanwhile, saw betrayal everywhere, father's distracted temper, my sister's jittery nerves, even the servants' stolen glances. She began interrogating them one by one, demanding to know if they'd spoken to reporters, if they'd leaked anything. It was chaos, disguised as routine, and through it all, I sat silently at the table, sipping my wine, head bowed, invisible. That was the beauty of being forgotten. The quiet one never drew suspicion, but the storm inside me grew louder with each passing day, because while their paranoia spread, their cracks widening with every breath, I knew this was only the beginning. They had not yet felt the weight of consequences. Not yet. That night, I decided to give them a taste. I began with father. His office was a fortress to everyone else, but to me it was an open door. I had watched him long enough to know his habits, where he hid keys, where he left his ledgers, which drawer held the accounts he never showed anyone. I entered in silence, the air heavy with the scent of whiskey and old leather. His papers were scattered, his handwriting rushed and furious across contracts and receipts. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Numbers that didn't add up. Funds that had been shifted, disguised, hidden. I copied them carefully, every detail, onto slips of paper. I didn't need the originals, just enough to hint, to nudge, to whisper louder. The next morning, one of those slips appeared on his desk at the firm, tucked between files. He discovered it in front of his associates. The way his face strained of color, the way his hand trembled as he tucked it quickly away, was better than any performance. His associates pretended not to notice, but I knew they did. Men like them always notice, and when noticing turns into questioning, the empire begins to crumble. For my sister, I chose a gentler strike. A photograph slipped into father's study drawer, waiting for him like a snake beneath the papers. It was one of the ones she thought she'd hidden, her with a man not approved by father, smiling too freely, her hand lingering too long on his arm. When father found it, I wasn't there to witness the explosion, but I heard it, the shattering of glass, the bellow of his voice, the slam of doors as my sister ran to her room in tears. Mother, of course, tried to intervene, tried to calm him, tried to protect her daughter. But father's rage wasn't easily tamed. By nightfall, the house was alive with tension. No one spoke at dinner. The clinking of cutlery against porcelain was the only sound. I sat there, tasting every bite like victory. This was what they deserved. This was only the beginning. But even as I savored it, I knew the real game was just beginning, because fear, once planted, grows faster than any seed. And soon, they would not just be fighting their own guilt. They would be fighting each other, and when that happened, when they turned against one another with suspicion and blame, that was when I would strike hardest. That was when revenge would no longer be invisible. It would be undeniable, and they would never see me coming. Paranoia can live quietly for a while, whispering in the dark, gnawing at the edges of the mind. But eventually, it grows too loud to ignore. Eventually, it demands a stage, and my family, my proud, perfect, untouchable family, finally gave it one. It began at the breakfast table. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows, catching on the silver teapots, the crystal glasses, the polished wood. On the surface, everything looked ordinary. But the air was thick, heavy, sharp. Father sat at the head of the table, his jaw locked, his eyes like shards of glass. My sister, pale and trembling, barely touched her toast. Mother stirred her tea with a hand that shook, the spoon clinking against porcelain in an uneven rhythm. I watched them, silent, savoring every second. Then father spoke. "Where were you last night?" The question wasn't directed at me. It never was. His gaze was locked on my sister. She blinked, startled. "In my room. Where else would I be?" "Don't lie to me." His voice was low, dangerous. "The servants said they saw you outside with him." The way he spat that last word him was like poison. My sister's lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes darted toward mother, seeking help. Mother set down her spoon. "Enough, Edward. She's done nothing wrong." "Nothing wrong?" His fist slammed against the table, rattling the plates. "I found the photograph, Margaret. Do you call that nothing?" The silence that followed was deafening. My sister's shoulders hunched, her hands trembling in her lap, and for the first time she broke. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "I love him." The room froze. I had dreamed of this moment of her confession, shattering the perfect facade they had worked so hard to maintain. Father's face turned crimson. "Love? You dare speak of love? With a man beneath you? A man who would drag our name into filth. Her voice cracked, but she lifted her chin, defiant. Better to love a man beneath me than live under the thumb of a father who controls every breath I take. The gasp that escaped Mother was genuine, sharp as a knife. I wanted to applaud. Father rose from his seat, towering over her, his hand clenched into a fist. For a moment, I thought he might strike her, but instead, he turned on Mother. This is your doing. You've filled her head with nonsense, haven't you? Whispering your lies, poisoning her against me. Mother recoiled, scandalized. How dare you? I have sacrificed everything for this family, and you dare accuse me. Her voice rose, shrill and trembling. I've carried your burdens, covered your shame, cleaned your messes for years. Don't you dare turn this on me, Edward. And just like that, the fire spread. My sister sobbed, accusing Father of tyranny, accusing Mother of silence, accusing everyone of never seeing her for who she was. Mother accused Father of betrayal, of corruption, of secrets she had been too loyal to expose. Father accused them both of weakness, of dishonor, of dragging his empire into ruin. Their words overlapped, harsh and violent, cutting through the room like broken glass, and I sat there, quiet, watching them tear each other apart. This was the beauty of it, how little I had to do, how quickly they destroyed themselves once the first domino fell. But I wasn't satisfied yet, because even as they shouted, even as they accused, none of them looked at me. None of them suspected the quiet daughter at the far end of the table, sipping her tea as though nothing were happening. That was about to change. That night, I set the next trap. In Mother's study, among her endless files and receipts, I placed a letter. Not in her handwriting, of course, but close enough that Father might not notice the difference at first glance. A letter addressed to a name from his past, an associate who had long since been disgraced, who had vanished under a cloud of scandal. The letter spoke of money moved quietly, of donations shifted, of debts owed. Enough to suggest that Mother had been working against Father, behind his back, for years. I left it in his office, tucked between his papers. By morning, the explosion was deafening. He stormed into her chambers, waving the letter in her face, demanding answers. She denied it, of course, swore she'd never seen it before. But the seed was planted. Her word meant nothing now. And then I slipped another gift into my sister's room, a set of photographs, carefully altered, showing her beloved with another woman. Just enough to break her heart, just enough to make her question if her rebellion had been for nothing. By dusk, she was in pieces, sobbing into her pillow, convinced she had been betrayed. The three of them, once so powerful, so united in their cruelty, were now islands, isolated and broken. And I was the tide that pulled them apart. But even tides can rise higher, and I was far from done. Because revenge wasn't just about watching them suffer. It was about making them need me. It was about making them turn to me, the forgotten daughter, the quiet one when they had no one else left. And when they did, when they reached for me with trembling hands, begging for comfort, for guidance, for salvation, I would remind them of every time they left me alone in the dark. Every time they laughed at my silence, every time they chose each other over me, and they would realize too late that the quiet one was never harmless. She was patient, and patience is deadlier than rage. Power is most intoxicating when it is invisible. By the 10th day, the house had transformed. Where once laughter and confidence had reigned, there was now tension and suspicion. The perfect family had fractured, each member isolated, each blaming the other, each teetering on the edge of collapse. And in the eye of that storm, I sat quietly, observing, listening, calculating. It began subtly. My sister, shaken and trembling, came to my room one evening. "Please," she whispered, her voice raw, "I need someone to talk to." I can't tell mother or father." I nodded, offering her a small, gentle smile. "Of course," I said softly, guiding her to the chair across from me. As she poured out her fears about the photographs, the secrets, the lies, I let her speak. I asked just enough questions to draw her further, letting her reveal everything she thought I didn't know. All of it was valuable. Every confession, every trembling admission, every fear became a thread I could weave into the tapestry of their undoing. The next day it was mother. She found me in the library, her hands clutching a teacup as though it were a lifeline. "I don't understand," she said, her voice tight. "How is everything unraveling? What am I missing?" I tilted my head, feigning concern. "Perhaps you've been carrying too much alone," I suggested. "Sometimes sharing the burden can help." Her eyes softened, and she began to confide. She spoke of her fear of father, of her anxieties about the charity, of the relentless pressure to maintain appearances. I listened patiently, nodding, interjecting just enough to encourage her. Everything she revealed only strengthened me. Every secret they trusted me with became another weapon, another lever, another point of control. Even father, proud and domineering as he was, eventually sought my counsel. The chaos had left him paranoid and vulnerable. One evening, he entered my room without knocking, papers in hand, voice tight. I need your advice," he admitted, something I had never expected to hear. "Something is wrong. The accounts, the company, they're slipping. You see these numbers?" I looked at them carefully, pretending to study the problem, pretending to weigh it. "Yes," I said softly. "I think I understand. Perhaps this could be resolved by checking the smaller, overlooked details, things others might miss." He exhaled sharply, relief mingling with gratitude. "You always have a clear eye. I don't know what I'd do without you." The words were like silk across a blade, sweet, soft, unsuspecting, and yet they cut deeper than any insult. I nodded, hiding my smile. "You think you're in control. You think you see me. You don't." Over the next days, this pattern repeated. Each of them came to me, seeking clarity, seeking comfort, seeking guidance. The very same daughter they had dismissed, humiliated, and ignored, the invisible one, was now the only person in the house who seemed capable of holding the pieces together. And they never guessed that every word I offered, every suggestion I gave, was calculated. I nudged father into overanalyzing his accounts, planting subtle doubts about his own decisions. I fed mother just enough information about her charity that she questioned every choice she had ever made. I whispered to my sister, in moments of quiet intimacy, just enough doubt about her lovers, her friends, her safety, to keep her on edge. They thought I was helping. They thought I was loyal. They were wrong, because in the quiet, invisible way, I was tightening the noose around each of them, and yet I didn't act recklessly. There was no rush. Patience was my most powerful ally. I had learned that the slower the unraveling, the sweeter the collapse. One evening, as I walked through the halls, I overheard father and mother speaking in low tones. Their conversation was a mixture of fear and confusion. "We can't trust anyone," father muttered. "I know," mother replied. Even her. I don't know what she knows, what she sees. I froze for a moment, letting the words hang in the air. Even her. My heart beat faster, but not with fear, with anticipation. They had finally started to glimpse the truth, the possibility that I was not the harmless, invisible daughter they had assumed. But they were wrong again. They didn't know how much I knew, because every secret, every lie, every misstep had already been mapped in my mind. I knew the weaknesses, the fears, the desires, the hidden vulnerabilities of each family member. And now, when they turned to me, seeking guidance, they were feeding me further, reinforcing the power I already held. It was intoxicating, and it was just the beginning, because the day would come when I would no longer need subtle nudges, whispers, or anonymous slips of paper. The day would come when the game shifted, when patience gave way to inevitability, when the invisible had finally revealed itself in full force, and when that day arrived, the family that had mocked me, dismissed me, humiliated me, and kept me in shadows would finally understand. I wasn't fragile. I wasn't invisible. I was inevitable, and no amount of pleading, no amount of excuses, no amount of denial would stop me. I had grown strong in the shadows. I had sharpened my mind in isolation. I had collected every piece of their weakness, every shard of their arrogance, every lie they told themselves to feel safe. And now, with each step they took toward me, begging for comfort, they were stepping into the trap I had so carefully set. One day, they would see the truth, and when they did, it would be too late. The quiet daughter they had ignored would stand at the center of the ruins, and she would be unstoppable. The calm before the storm had lasted long enough. They thought the chaos inside the house was private, confined to whispers and silent accusations. They believed the cracks were hidden behind closed doors, that the facade of perfection still held outside these walls. They were wrong. I began planting hints where the world could see, just enough to unsettle, just enough to spark curiosity. It started with Mother. A carefully crafted letter, anonymous, arrived at the local charity board, questioning financial discrepancies she had worked so hard to hide. The letter contained no names, no direct accusations, only facts, slightly rearranged enough to make anyone reading it wonder. Mother panicked. She questioned her staff, her friends, even father. And of course, she turned to me. "Help me," she pleaded. I nodded, pretending concern. "Let me look at it," I said softly. And as I helped, I guided her, making small errors seem larger, fears seem justified, her pride weaken inch by inch. Then I turned to Father. His financial empire had already been shaken by the small anonymous slips of paper I had sent earlier. Now, a business partner called with fake questions about accounts, rumors about mismanagement circulating in hushed tones. Father stormed into my room, demanding to know what I knew. I met his gaze calmly. "I only see what is already visible. Perhaps you should speak with your partners directly," and that was enough. Suspicion had grown. Paranoia had seeped into every corner of their lives. Next came my sister. Her love life, already fragile, became fodder for subtle exposure. I left accidental hints in places she thought private. A photograph misplaced. A letter found by the servants. Rumors, carefully guided, reached the ears of those she trusted most. Her confidence cracked. One by one, they turned to me, seeking guidance, seeking safety, seeking me. And each time, they fed me more power. The real thrill came when the first public consequence occurred. One of Father's rivals, tipped subtly by the letters I had found, began questioning transactions in the firm. One small article appeared in the business press, an innocuous line about discrepancies in the accounts. But in the world of high finance, whispers travel faster than the truth, Father raged. He didn't know who had started it, didn't know how it had begun. All he knew was that his empire was no longer untouchable, and he turned to me, the quiet daughter, for counsel. I guided him. I soothed him. I helped him. All the while I held the cards. Mother's charity faced more scrutiny. A minor audit was requested. I advised her calmly on how to respond, all while ensuring her stress grew. Her mistakes multiplied. My sister's romantic entanglements began leaking, not fully public, but enough that social circles whispered, reputations questioned, and alliances weakened. By now, the family's unity had completely fractured. They were no longer a team. They were individuals clawing at survival, desperate for guidance, desperate for reassurance. And they didn't even realize the person they clung to was orchestrating their destruction. It was intoxicating. The beauty of revenge isn't just in the act itself. It's in watching the unraveling, the subtle shifts in behavior, the slow terror of realizing the world is no longer under control. And they were terrified. The next step was inevitable. Father's mismanaged accounts began to surface more publicly. Mother's charity faced increasing scrutiny. My sister's relationships were whispered about in social circles, questions asked that couldn't be answered. And always, they turned to me. I was the one who soothed, the one who advised, the one they trusted, the one who stood in the eye of the storm, calm, composed, untouchable. But the storm was mine, and soon it would consume them entirely. Because while they thought they were relying on me for survival, I was guiding them toward collapse. Every decision, every move, every panic-driven action led them deeper into the trap I had laid, and the public unraveling was only the beginning. Private chaos had become visible. Paranoia had become fear, and in fear, the greatest power lies. I could see it in their eyes now, father's sharp glances, mother's trembling hands, my sister's broken confidence. They were beginning to understand that perfection is fragile, that control is an illusion, that appearances can be destroyed. But they still didn't know who held the true power. I did. And when the time came for the final reveal, they would know exactly who they had underestimated all along. Because I had been here, in the shadows, watching, listening, learning, waiting, and the quiet daughter they had mocked, the invisible sister they had ignored, the fragile girl they had dismissed, she had become their reckoning, and nothing would save them. The day of reckoning arrived like a storm breaking over the house. It was a quiet morning at first. The sun slanted through the tall windows, illuminating the cracks in the marble floors, the splintered edges of once polished furniture, the tension thick in the air. Each family member moved cautiously, as if stepping on fragile glass, and I watched. The hour had come to reveal the truth. It started with a simple dinner, father's favorite occasion, mother's carefully planned seating, my sister's hesitation at taking the place she had always claimed as her own. They expected nothing extraordinary, nothing threatening. They had no idea that the invisible daughter, the one they had dismissed for years, was about to stand in the center of everything. I entered the dining room, composed, serene. My eyes swept across them. Father's jaw tightened, mother's lips pressed together in a fragile smile. My sister sat rigid, her hands clenched in her lap. All of them sensed something, but none guessed the magnitude. I began to speak softly, deliberately. I think it's time we spoke honestly. Fathers, Eyes darted to me. What do you mean? Mother tensed. Be careful how you speak, child. My sister shrank back, as if I had grown taller, as if I had claimed a presence she could not understand. I mean that for years I have watched, I said, my voice calm but sharp. I have listened. I have observed. I have been invisible. While you all played at perfection, while you all hid your secrets, while you all hurt me without notice, they stared at me. Fear flickered in their eyes. The air thickened. You have underestimated me, I continued. You have believed that because I was quiet, because I was patient, because I did not speak, I was powerless. But patience, invisibility, silence, these are not weaknesses. They are weapons. My sister's lips trembled. Father's hands tightened on the edge of the table. Mother's eyes widened. You have turned on each other, I said, letting the words linger. You have broken yourselves apart with paranoia, suspicion, and fear. You have turned to me seeking guidance, seeking comfort, while I held every secret, every weakness, every mistake. And all along, I was preparing. I walked slowly around the table, my eyes meeting each of theirs. Every lie you told, every secret you buried, every cruelty you inflicted, they are no longer hidden. They are mine. And now the world sees what you have done, what you are, and what you cannot control. I paused, letting it sink in. They were speechless, frozen. I could see the realization dawning, the full scope of what they had ignored. The daughter they had treated as invisible was now the one in command. You thought I was fragile, I said. You thought I was powerless. You thought I would remain in the shadows forever. But shadows hold power. Shadows see everything. Shadows wait. I lifted a stack of letters, photographs, and documents, everything I had collected, carefully curated to reveal the truth. I placed them on the table. Here, I said, everything you feared being revealed, everything you hoped would remain secret, all of it. Father's face paled. He tried to snatch the papers, but I held them back. No, I said softly. This is for you to see, for you to understand, for you to realize that the world outside is not blind. And neither am I, Mother gasped. My sister covered her mouth. All three were silent, staring at the evidence of their failings, their hypocrisy, their lies. I stepped back. For years, I was ignored, dismissed, humiliated. For years, I was forced to watch while you pretended to be perfect. And now, you must watch me reclaim what is mine. Father's voice shook. You can't, I can, I interrupted. And I have. Every move, every whisper, every manipulation, I have orchestrated it all. You have destroyed yourselves from within, guided by your own arrogance, and I only gave it direction. You sought comfort from me. You sought guidance from me. You begged for reassurance, and I gave you what you deserved, clarity. Clarity about your failures. Mother's hands shook. You were behind all of this. I nodded. Yes. And the best part is, you never saw it coming. You never suspected that the quiet daughter, the invisible one, the one you dismissed, would be the force that brought everything crashing down. My sister wept openly now, her face buried in her hands. I didn't know. You didn't know, because you never looked, I said softly. You only looked at yourselves. And now, it is too late to undo what has been done. The room was still, silent, heavy with shock, betrayal, and awe. I let them sit with it. Let them feel the magnitude of their mistakes. Let them understand the full power of patience, of invisibility, of quiet rage carefully cultivated. And then I spoke the final words. This is not hatred. This is justice. This is reclamation. And from now on, the person you ignored, the person you thought powerless, will decide how this family moves forward. They looked at me, broken, humbled, aware that the game had ended. That the invisible daughter, the quiet observer, had risen. And that no apology, no plea, no excuse could undo what had been orchestrated. I stood there tall, composed, untouchable. The daughter they had dismissed, underestimated, and forgotten had claimed her place. The house that once reeked of control, arrogance, and pretension now belonged to me, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight lift, not of revenge alone, but of power reclaimed, of self-worth restored, of justice delivered. The storm had passed, but the echoes of its fury would linger forever, and I would always be the quiet force behind them, the shadow they could never underestimate again. I had survived their cruelty, their neglect, their contempt, and I had triumphed, not through anger, not through hatred, not through recklessness, through patience, through strategy, through knowing myself and knowing them better than they knew themselves. And that, finally, was enough. As the dust settles and the secrets lay bare, one truth remains: power is never given, it is claimed. The invisible can become unstoppable, the quiet can become dominant, and the overlooked can rise higher than anyone imagined. This isn't just a story of revenge, it's a story of patience, strategy, and reclaiming what was always yours. The scars left behind may never fully heal, but they serve as a reminder. Underestimate no one, and never ignore the strength within. If you were captivated by this tale of betrayal, secrets, and triumph, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more gripping family drama stories. And remember, sometimes the quietest voice carries the sharpest edge.